Okay, we're getting very close.
Hi, Bobby. This is Sabrina Escobedo. I just wanted to let you know I was on the call as well.
I am so glad to hear you. Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and start. And I'd like to welcome everyone to the Child Care and Education Committee of the Early Learning Council to our October meeting. And I want to do, before we do introductions, I want to do a special welcome to the newest member of the committee, Donna. Donna, you know, after all of these years, I'm still not sure that I pronounced your name, your last name. Schnickner? No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not even going to try. Would you please just briefly introduce yourself? It doesn't look like you're on mute, Donna. Oh. Well, Donna is a member of the Early Learning Council who is joining our committee, and I'm going to let her introduce herself when I wonder if maybe she's still working with her telephone connection. So I see that she's joined the meeting, but have not but haven't heard her yet. So my guess is, oh, I can see you, Donna. Donna, can you hear us? I'm going to send her a chat message. Does everyone know there's a chat function at the bottom of our screen? So, hopefully. Okay, the other people I would like to do a special welcome to are two of the ad hoc members of our committee who join and become members of the committee when we are dealing with relief nursery rules, and that's Christy Cox and Kelly Sutherland. The third person is Donalda, and she is not, she let us know that there was a conflict. So, Cass, can somebody provide technical assistance to Donna because she can't hear us? That's what she just sent a message on the chat.
Okay, I'll help her.
Thank you.
I'll try and help her.
Thank you a lot.
Sure.
There was more than one phone number for us to use, and I wondered. Okay. So, members of the committee, would you please, and I've got names, and so I'll, just to make it easier, Sabrina, will you quickly introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Sabrina Escobedo. I oversee education, mental health, and disabilities for OCDC in Malheur County.
Great. Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie Barnes. I'm with the Child Care Resource Center of Multnomah County. Quality
Welcome.
Improvement.
And Tim?
I'm Tim Bratz, Executive Director of Mountain Star Relief Nursery, one of the Oregon relief nurseries in Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson County.
Welcome. Kamala?
Hi, I'm Kamala Wymore, and I'm an independent consultant with Early Education.
Thank you. Welcome. And Donna's getting her phone worked out. Abby?
Sorry, this is Abby Bush. I'm the Associate Program Officer for Early Childhood Programs with the Oregon Community Foundation.
Welcome. And let's see, have I missed any members of the Child Care and Education Committee other than Donna, who we're waiting for her to get through?
Hi, this is Sue Norton. I'm with the Child Care Resource Referral and Lane Community College in Lane County.
Welcome, Sue. And any other members of the committee? Okay. We have a number of staff supporting us today for different parts of our agenda. Let's see, Kelly, I'm just going to go down the list. I've got Kelly Walker.
Hi, everybody. This is Kelly Walker, and I'm going to do the least amount of talking possible as I'm been quite ill.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for joining.
Me too. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Rich?
Hi, it's Richard Riggs, Legal Administrator with Office of Child Care.
Welcome. Tammy?
Tammy Scott, Regional Manager for Office of Child Care.
Nikisha?
Hi,
I bet you're on
Jeanette
mute.
Coyle, Early Learning Division.
Welcome. David?
Hi, this is David.
Catherine?
Catherine Miller, I'm a Regional Manager from the Office of Child Care.
Lisa?
Hi, Lisa Pinero, I'm a Policy Analyst with the Early Learning Division.
Henry?
Hi, this is Henry Oliva. I'm a Regional Licensing Manager with the Early Learning Division.
And Peter?
Hi, this is Peter Bloom. I'm a Project Manager with the Early Learning Division.
Okay. And is Donna?
I'm here.
Oh, wonderful. Donna, I've let everybody know that you're the newest member of the committee and left it for you to introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Donna Schnicker, and I direct the Early Childhood Programs in Harney County. And I am a recent member of the Early Learning Council. And I am the president of the Oregon Head Start Association.
Well, welcome with all your hats. Okay, and then we do have, as Tim introduced, Mary Ellen Glinda from the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries, and will be actually presenting to us today. Mary Ellen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Mary Ellen Glynn. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries, and I'll be talking to you about the rules and the extremely complicated, colorful document that you received from nice folks at ELD.
Thank you very much. So other than members of the public who have joined us, and welcome to you also, have I missed any committee members or staff who are on the call?
This is Meredith Russell. I'm on Program Development Lead and Spark.
Oh,
Thanks, buddy.
I missed you, Meredith. Welcome. Great. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, and this is Dawn Barberis, Early Learning Division Program Specialist, and I'm here in the room with a lot of ELD folks.
Okay, welcome. Okay, and members of the public, I want to tell you that we will have at least one, probably more than one, time, maybe only one today because of the nature of the agenda. But anyway, we will take time for public comment, and well, we're very glad you're here and welcome your input at the time of public on the agenda for public comment. So I want to do a brief review of the agenda today. We're going to quickly do we've been through this so many times that I don't expect it to take a long time for us to do the criminal background record check rules. These are updates. And then we're going to have a briefing on the Child Care Contribution Tax Credit Program rules. This is, because that is, there were some legislative changes made. We're also going to get an update on the Spark rules. And then we're going to have this substantial block of the meeting dedicated to the relief nursery rules, which we spent a lot of time on about a year ago. There's been a lot of work in between, and we're going to get caught up on that. And then we're going to have the staff, the licensing staff for the childcare rule updates that we're doing are coming back to us with some information we requested on staff qualifications and staff training. So that's our agenda, and I think let's get started with the side-by-side of the criminal background record rules. And Lisa, I assume this is you.
Actually, this Rich Riggs will give you an update.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right.
So thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Bobby. Again, this is Richard Riggs, Legal Administrator with the Office of Child Care. The criminal background registry rules changes are being driven by two primary factors. The first one is the Child Care Development Block Grant Act of 2014. There were changes there that required the Office of Child Care to basically who can be enrolled, and we see those changes in the Rule 0050, where we have taken out a number of crimes that used to be we would consider for a period of time, and we move those to a category of crime where people can no longer be enrolled under federal law if they have those, and that includes things like arson and rape and different things, and so they can no longer be enrolled in a central background registry. So a lot of the changes that you see are driven by the federal requirements. The other main driver is the House Bill 2259, and there were significant changes there that required changes throughout our rules, including changing the enrollment period from 2 years to 5 years, granting the agency authority to look at adult protective services case and foster care records, and then just some of the change in the language itself from child protective services records we've changed to child abuse and neglect records, and you can see that on the page that's currently pulled up. And so we've gone through and made these changes throughout. One or two of the other changes after being in this position for about 8 months now and working with Department of Justice, we felt we needed to strengthen our application process itself. And so when you look at the Rule 0035, and if you go down a little further on that side by side, we outline in rule our application process. And we thought that was important, so because people have rights when they apply, and we want to make sure that the process is well laid out as well as if they don't complete the application process, what the agency rights and actions would be as well. And
Rich, we're not seeing the right page yet.
no, I'm not sure who's controlling the side by side, but if they scroll down to the rule where it says 0035, that would be the application process rule.
It's page 6.
Thank you. Yep. There you go. So this is a new rule that we wrote that goes through the application process, tells us what we need to check, tells us what the person who's submitting the application needs to do, and we thought this was important. A lot of this was in different parts of the rules, and we've moved it to this rule, and we've also strengthened and outlined the process a little bit more. So if we move down a little further, and let's see, I'll go to page. Let's go to page 9. And that's the rule 0045. There we go. So these are the rules that under CCDF require us to no longer allow these people to be registered. And a lot of these rules, as you can see at the very bottom, it says aggravated murder, criminal homicide. Under our former rules, I heard some chuckling, under our former rules, we would consider these crimes for a period of time, and I think for those it was 20 years, and they were considered a category 1 crime. And so conceivably somebody who committed murder 20 or more years ago and have went through the suitability process could be enrolled in our rules, but under federal law they cannot be enrolled any longer. And so that includes child abuse and neglect or other crimes against children. And all these crimes were listed in our next rule, which is 0050, the history to be considered. There you go. But I moved them out of there and I moved them into the rule 0045. And so you see all these changes, all these things that are lined out are moved to the rule that we looked at previously. And going down a little further.
So we didn't eliminate anything, we just added. Is that correct, Rich?
That's correct. So we did not eliminate anything. And actually what we did is we made it, all these things that are lined out, stop there. That's fine. Just stop there. So like this one where it says trafficking in persons, that was lined out here in this rule, but it was moved up to the previous rule 0045. So we are still considering it, but if somebody is convicted of trafficking in persons under this rule on this page, they would have gone through the suitability process, but under the new rule, they can't be in the registry period. So it's actually strengthened our central background registry rules on who can get in and making it a higher hurdle to jump over for people that have these different types of criminal convictions in their past.
And this is in a home, this is anyone over 18 who's there when the children are present, is that correct?
That's correct. So it does apply to the subject individual, which is any person over age 18 that may have unsupervised access to child care children. And again, these changes are all driven by changes in federal law and rule. So there's not a lot of discretion in making these changes. It's something that we had to do.
Bobby, this is Tim. Can I ask a follow-up question on this section?
Sure, please do.
So I'm just curious about the sex offender piece in particular. So I think there's tiers or different levels of sex offense crimes. So is this categorically prohibiting anyone with a sex offense to be entered into the system?
So I'm going to go back to that rule. If their sexual offense is one of these that's listed on page 9 or 10, then the answer would be yes. That if they have a sexual offense that's listed here, and you see on page 10 on paragraphs B and C talks about abuse and neglect of kids, and then crime involving rape, sexual assault, abuse, so on. So if their offense falls on one of those statutes, then yes, they would not be allowed to be enrolled in our central background registry. But it does not just categorically deny somebody who might be registered as a sex offender. It's based on the actual crime that you're convicted of. We do check the sex offender registry though, and that is something. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me take that back. So if we go to page 9, paragraph 3, if they are registered or required to be registered on any state, tribal, or U.S. territory sex offender registry, they can't be enrolled as well.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was just kind of imagining this situation if you're 50 and when you were 18, you were had a crime involving a minor, having sex with a minor.
Mm-hmm.
You're 50, you're still prohibited?
That would be correct. If you're enrolled, and again, this is driven by federal law, but yes, that would be correct. I know it seems harsh in some instances, or may seem harsh.
It's ambiguous. It's complicated. I think that's the thing. But that clarity is helpful. Thank you.
Do any of the other committee members have questions of Rich about any sections of the rule?
This is Leslie. I have a question. Is there any idea of what kind of impact this will be on current child care providers that maybe have a family member in the home, that maybe they've done child care for 20 years and they have a relative in the home, and now they're going to have to close their business possibly?
Well, no, I have not, or our staff has not gone through and looked at who may have some of this questionable criminal history and how they're going to be impacted. We are going to have to do that because it's a requirement that these people not be enrolled in our central background registry. And if there are, if they're a provider and they have this criminal history, that's one thing. If it's a spouse who's living, that could also be very impactful. If it's an extended family member, then there may be other options with the person seeking a residence elsewhere, and then they could continue the business. But I agree that this is going to have a pretty broad impact. But again, this is being driven by federal law.
And then how much notice will providers receive? I might have missed that somewhere.
So we will go through this process through all new applications and renewals going forward once these rules are implemented. We are still working out the details for those people who may be enrolled and how we're going to address that. We will have to address that. We haven't yet ironed out those details.
Other questions? Rich, can you describe the next steps in this process?
The next steps would be these rules would go before and Lisa, feel free to correct me if I get this wrong, but they would go to the Early Learning Council itself for approval. I believe also concurrently or thereabouts filed with the Secretary of State in the Oregon Bulletin for comment. And then we would look at those comments that we may receive and it may act on them if they are actionable. And then it would go back to the Early Learning Council for a final vote and adoption. Is that about right, Lisa?
Yes, that's about right. The public comment period will probably be extended on these rules. It was originally open some time ago, but a little bit late to get this final draft, so it will probably be extended. And I have to go look at the calendar, but just
Lisa,
folks. Yes.
Lisa, I should know this, but I don't. So is the Child Care and Education Committee making a recommendation on these to the council this month?
Yes, if the committee feels that they're able to, they could make a recommendation to the council today, and that could be transmitted to the council.
Okay, so I would like to stop for a minute and take public comment if there's any, and then the next step, so you can be thinking about this, council members, we're going to do a consensus, assessment of consensus, and ask you on the 6 to 5 if there's anybody who would give it below a 3, sending this forward to council with a recommendation for them to act. So I'd like to stop now, and if there's any member of the public who would like to comment on these rules, we ask that you keep it to 2 minutes or under, but we would like to hear from you. Okay, I'm assuming that there is no comment. So committee members, I ask that if there is any member of the committee who would give moving this to the council with a recommendation for them to act, to move forward promulgating the rule as revised, to please indicate that that you would give it below a 3 right now. All right. Then Lisa and Rich, the Child Care and Education Council is recommending that this revised criminal background record set of rules be sent to council for action. All right. The next thing on our agenda is a briefing on the Child Care Contribution Tax Credit. This is, we are not going to act. This is a briefing. And Sandy Grisage or Lisa, one of you is going to lead us on this.
Yeah, this is Lisa Pinero. So what you'll be seeing from staff here in your next meeting will be some draft rules to comply with the legislative changes that took place in 2017 to the Oregon Child Contribution Tax Credit Program. If you're not familiar with the contribution program, it allows taxpayers to contribute funds to the Office of Child Care, and for those contributions, they receive a tax credit certificate. The tax credit is essentially 50 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar that an individual contributes, they receive 50 cents in tax credits, which they can apply to their taxable liability in the next tax year, and in fact they can actually transfer that to subsequent tax years if they don't have the liability to meet it. The contributions that come into the Office of Child Care are dispersed to small business owners and to child care providers who are engaged in the QRIS and to support other programs for technical assistance and quality improvement for center and family-based child care facilities. The changes that took place in 2017 really were just mostly technical changes, but took the program, the statutory revisions took the program and are reflective of the current practices. So we just need to do some cleanup for in rule, because there's some references to non-existing advisory committees and other groups that no longer exist. So highly technical in nature, and I invite you to look into the child care tax, or the contribution tax credit program, contribute to it if you'd like, but also just to familiarize yourself with the program and what it does. And that's pretty much it. I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Am I correct, Lisa, that this does not change the way Oregon is distributing these funds, which I understand primarily to be education awards? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. There's no change. And in fact, the statutory changes were sought in order to better characterize what really is happening with regard to the education awards.
Okay.
Hello, this is Jacob with KinderCare. Can you give a little?
Jacob, just a second. We will ask for public comment, but right now, this is a conversation amongst the committee. But we do want to hear from you, and I will be sure and open for public comment. Thank you. So, committee members.
Thanks.
Committee members, do you have any questions about the change? This is not the program itself and how we, but the tax credit, the language that enables the Early Learning Division to collect money through the tax credit. Do you have? We are not acting today. This is a briefing, but But do you have any questions about it for Lisa? Okay. I will open for public comment then, Jacob. We would love to hear your comment.
Oh, I was just going to ask a question actually, to just know a little bit in more detail how the credits are distributed to childcare providers. You said it's an education award. Is that sort of like a grant structure?
Yes, it's administered. You know, some of the staff will do a better job than I. It's administered, my understanding is by the Oregon Center for Career Development for people who meet the criteria. And it's for
the education award.
The workforce.
So it goes to individual.
It goes to individuals.
Is it like the STEP awards, Bobby? Is that what you're trying to say?
This is the education award as well as the there's some Spark incentive as well. This is Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
So for the QRS incentive, would that go to a child care center, or would that also go to individuals?
The QRS incentives go to the center. The education awards go to the individuals.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. So, committee members, public, any more questions? Otherwise, this is coming back to us. This was a briefing. Okay. Then we are now ready to move to the discussion on relief nurseries. We are not acting today.
Bobby, sorry to interrupt. I would like to also do just a brief update status report on Spark rule development.
Lisa, I was just going to be explaining the process and sending that conversation to you. Are you wanting us to do something before we start discussing the relief nursery rule?
Yes, I'm sorry, Bobby. We just had also on the agenda, and the same agenda item, just wanted to provide the committee an status report on Spark rule development.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? That was a subheading and I just missed it. Thank you so much, Lisa. Yes.
Sure. So the Child Care and Education Committee has received 2 or 3 briefings and some updates on the development of Spark standards over the past spring and summer. We just really wanted to update you on development of rule language. For your information, the Early Learning Council received an update from the Spark Revision Ad Hoc Committee on September 28th, and that was really with regard to the development of the standards. And so if you have interested, you might want to check out that link there to the video of the council meeting. We are working on rule language that essentially will, they're really technical rules in that they provide a process for who's responsible for developing the standards, who's responsible for implementing and managing the standards and the ratings for these standards, how a provider or facility might appeal a rating that they've received, or what due process they might have with regard to receiving ratings. And we're also looking at some alternative paths for programs who are not subject to licensure so that they can participate in Spark as well. Currently, we have some draft language that's undergoing legal review. Really need to make sure that we have a robust review on that because of the license exempt situation that we're dealing with facilities and providers who want to engage in Spark. So you probably will be seeing some draft language at your November meeting. And that's pretty much it. And happy to answer questions on the rule development process.
So I think what's really important for committee members, and the public, is that this committee is not dealing with the content of Spark standards or the content of the Spark program. What our focus is rules that will say who does what and gives the council authority to adopt rules regarding the Spark program, because it's a new program, and then all the things about that Lisa has mentioned. So the committee members, any questions? We're going to see these rules between now and the November meeting. Does anybody have any questions or information that they would like to receive prior to receiving the draft rules? Okay. Anybody in the public want to make any comment? You're not seeing the rules themselves, so there's nothing very substantive. This is a briefing to prepare us because we're going to act in November. Okay. All right. Thank you for catching, Lisa. My copy of the agenda I was using was an old one. I'm sorry. And so I missed the Spark. I'm so glad you caught it. Then we now are going to move on to Relief Nursery. And here's the process that we're going through. Lisa is going to summarize, because it was a long time ago that this committee worked. We took a full day, if you remember, and then we had other meeting time devoted to it. And then we put our work on hold while a work group worked through it. And so it's now coming back to us. So Lisa is going to summarize what we've done to date. There's also new legislation that was passed in the 17th session. She's going to summarize that. And then we have asked Mary Ellen Glenn to walk through the proposed revisions that they submitted last Friday, October 6th. And we're going to ask Mary Ellen to explain the rationale and give us some examples about that. And then we will have a conversation amongst committee members, and that will include the ad hoc members, since this has to do with Relief Nursery. And then we will take public comments. So Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us from where we ended to today.
Are we ready? Okay, great. I'm just going to pull up a document here, so bear with me a minute. I got too far away from that folder.
So committee members and members of the public, these are the proposed rule changes that you received and that have been posted that Lisa is going to put on our screen.
So, but first, I just want to kind of bring you all up back to the center. The Child Care and Education Committee first began considering rulemaking for Relief Nursery administrative rules just about a little over a year ago. We had some interactions with the Early Learning Council, and after that briefing with the council asked the Early Learning Division staff to meet with Relief Nursery representatives and Early Learning Division administrative staff to work out some other issues that centered really primarily on contract language, and that also led to some discussions about some of the administrative responsibilities of the division or the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries. So that work took place throughout late fall and early winter of 2016, 2017. During the 2017 legislative session, Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries introduced legislation, Senate Bill 314, to ask and seek some statutory revisions to their statutes, and that process led to a legislative work group that was convened by Chair John Lively of the House Early Childhood and Family Supports Committee. That work group comprised of ELD, Relief Nursery representatives, and other legislative staff, and some liaisons for ORN. We came to some agreement on some legislative statutory revisions. Senate Bill 314 was approved by the legislature during the session, and I will switch over to a new document that kind of describes what Senate Bill 314 does. Did you share my screen? Can you?
Oh, we all have Tammy.
Yeah, you all have Tammy.
Lisa, are you aware that we don't have anything on our screen?
I am just now became aware of that. So let's see what's happening here. Can you see that?
Yay.
There you go. Fixed it. So, Senate Bill 314 was adopted by the legislature and signed by the governor.
Just a second, Lisa. Will everybody who is not speaking mute their own phone? Because for some reason we're starting to get feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it just says 10 stuff. Okay. So, Senate Bill 314 was adopted by the legislature, signed by the governor, and it will be codified. Well, right now it's Chapter 645 of 2017 Oregon laws. The bill itself was effective on August 2nd. However, the provisions of the bill will not be operative until December 1st of 2017. That is just so that the effective date allows the division to do what it needs to do in order to be ready for when these provisions are then operative. The bill defines and describes the service requirements of relief nursery programs, such that relief nursery programs are those programs that provide services to families with at-risk children 0 to 5, where the participation and progress of each child are tracked. It's a non-governmental, community-based nonprofit entity and maintains or exceeds services necessary to be certified and maintain certification by the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries. Those services are specifically called out in the legislation to include therapeutic early childhood programs, home visiting, parent education, support, and outreach. The bill further describes the allowable uses of public funds to include all of those listed below, but also prescribes that public funds received by a relief nursery program shall be used to meet these 4 outcomes, outcomes of improved child safety, reduced foster care placements, improved healthy child development, and family support, resulting in improved family functioning. The bill specifically requires the Early Learning Council to adopt rules, including rules that require that those public funds are actually used to meet these 4 outcomes, and requires relief nursery programs to participate in statewide independent evaluations, to document those outcomes. And I think one of the other most important features of the bill was that asset forfeiture proceeds with which relief nurseries are received through the legislative process and through the administrative process would not be counted in the calculation of the amount that's required for matching community financial support. So that is, in a nutshell, what Senate Bill 314 does. And the one provision, of course, that you will now see in any draft rule are the rules that outline and stipulate that public funds must be used to achieve these outcomes here. So that's Senate Bill 314. I think I captured the highlights of it. And I will then, unless there's other questions about the bill, that brings us back to today, why we're here, and committee is now resuming consideration of the rules. Staff went through an analysis of any potential fiscal impacts, and it's our determination that there should be no fiscal impact of any of the provisions of the rule. That will be something that the council, this committee rather, would want to consider and either concur with or offer alternative conclusions on any fiscal impact. I'll pause if there are any questions. Okay. Now I'm going to switch over to the side-by-side, but Bobby, I think at this point, if you, did you want to get into this now, or you want to go ahead and, okay. So.
No, I think it's, my understanding is that what we would like to do now is have the side-by-side up and ask Mary Ellen to share with us the revisions that the Oregon Association for Relief Nurseries would like considered, and the rationale for that. So just, are we going to see the side-by-side now, Lisa?
We are certainly working on that.
Okay, all right. All right.
So, Bobby, before Mary Ellen starts, let me just kind of give you all a bit of some tips on how to navigate through this, as Mary Ellen called it, a very complicated and complex document.
Excuse me, I don't know who's speaking. Can you? I can't see. So can you tell me who's talking? Tell us.
This is Lisa.
Oh, didn't sound like you, Lisa. Okay. So now, I'm sorry. So Lisa, you want to tell us something about the side-by-side?
I do. We're still trying to get it to show on I'm trying to share my screen with you all. So, let me share. Yeah, can you go ahead and just give me permission back. Yeah, Cassandra's pulling it up. Bear with us a second. All good.
Technical difficulties. For some reason, Tammy, your name comes up. When we're between viewing a screen, it says Tammy Scott for some reason.
I know, it's my claim to fame, Bobby. It's subliminal of some sort.
Tammy did it on purpose.
That's not very subliminal.
Well, we do apologize, but in the meantime, I know that I sent this out to you all. So let me just share with you, you're all very familiar with this format, meaning the side-by-side format. And so I kind of wanted to stick with it. But so what you'll see, of course, on the first two left columns is just, a purpose statement so that or the rule section, so that we kind of figure out what section of the rule we're looking at. The second column on the left is, of course, any possible recommended or preliminary language. The next column, of course, will be our findings for the fiscal impact statement. The second to the last column on the right are generally staff notes, where I put in notes for either myself or to help the committee understand context or history. And then finally, the big kahuna here, this far right corner will include all the public comments that we have received to date, as well as what I did when we received comments from from Orrin on Friday. I went ahead and just plugged them in here so that we all had them on one document and we weren't having to go back and forth. So that's how you navigate and read through it. Yes, it's incredibly complicated. What I've done in order for us to hopefully better identify, can you scroll down to the second page? Identify in this column, in the right-hand column, I indicated Orrin's suggestion. For example, change definition of therapeutic early childhood program. I put in the language that's being changed, being proposed to be changed, and highlighted it in red. So, and highlighted in yellow with some red font. So I tried to make it distinctive and to stand out. So if you have any questions, please just let me know.
Lisa, I lost you. It's highlighted in yellow to tell us what?
That tells you Orrin's specific, where the change really is. I mean, if you look at the difference between their recommended language and that language that's currently being proposed and under consideration.
Okay, so the highlighted language is the language that would change what is in the left column?
Correct.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I asked because I just wasn't tracking it. Okay. Any other help like that, Lisa, to help us know how to read this document?
No, I don't think so. I think that it's just a collection bin for everything that's going on with relief nursery rule.
Okay, so then, Mary Ellen, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I wonder, do you want to tell, Cass, I think you're controlling the screen, is that correct?
That's correct.
So, Mary Ellen, if we are not viewing the page you want us to, will you just tell Cass the page number so she knows to take us to the appropriate section of the rule?
So I can't see what's up on your screens, but I will tell you in whatever detail you need where I am, if that's helpful.
Oh, okay. You're not viewing the screen.
Nope, but I have it in front of me.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Do you want to tell Cass what page you would like to start on?
Page number 1.
Okay. Thank you.
So for everybody, this is Mary Ellen Glynn. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries. I'm here in a room with your fellow colleagues on the CCEC committee, Tim Rusk and Kelly Sutherland. So if they pipe in, you'll know who they are. And I would say first that a lot of work has been done on this, and I really appreciate the hard work and the stamina of the ELD personnel for putting all their time into this. And I'd also further say that the vast majority of this language looks really good to us, and we don't have any suggestions about. So with that disclaimer, I'll jump in, and I'll start with page 1 in definitions, which is 414-600-0015. We'd like to use the definition of relief nursery. It actually, that bleeds onto page 2, Cass. So we'd like to use the definition of relief nursery found in SB 314. We think as a matter of expediency, you could probably just refer to the statute rather than putting all this verbiage in, but I leave that up to you all. So moving on to page number 2. We have some changes to the definition of therapeutic early childhood program. We just wanted to make it more closely resemble what we do so that there's a fuller picture of what the TECP thing is, which is kind of the core of relief nursery services, so that it's in rule and the core of it is very specific. So you see that on the right-hand part. And break in if you have any questions for me, please.
Well, on this, can you give us some examples of, or help us understand the difference between what is in the left column and what you would change? What's different about in all domains from what is there? Can you just give us a little bit more information?
Sure. When we said in all domains, we wanted to make sure that all emerging emotional and social component of what we do is included in that. So it's all aspects, a holistic look at the child and family.
Okay.
Any more questions?
I'm afraid I'm not knowledgeable enough to understand how that substantively changes. I wonder if you could give us some examples of why one language would be better than the other. It's not that I have any problem, it's that I'm not sure that I'm following.
Yeah, Bobby, this is Tim. I think we're just looking for a little bit more detail and matching a little closer to what's in the relief nursery material. So I don't know that it's substantively different. It is just a little bit more focused on the various domains of child development and the work to strengthen families.
Thank you.
Bobby, this is Kelly too, and it really, it's unique to relief nursery that our a therapeutic early childhood classroom isn't just an educational setting, and it has emotional and social components that are really very important to the therapeutic model. And so we felt as if expanding to include all domains would embrace not only the physical health of the children, but also their emotional and social wellness and ability to be in the classroom.
Thank you.
So moving on to number 9 of that section on page 2, we suggest that for trauma-specific services that we use the definition based off from Trauma-Informed Oregon, and so we've included it there.
Thank you.
Moving on to page 3, certification of relief nurseries. We've suggested certification of relief nurseries to receive state funding. And this is a discussion that we've had with the state for quite some time. Relief nurseries certify, ORN certifies relief nurseries based on quality assurance standards and minimum requirements. And we're gonna continue to do that. The state, though, has a concern about how state funding is distributed, and we respect that. And so we think maybe perhaps the best thing that we can do is to add the phrase to receive state funding into certification, to kind of separate those things out so that we know we're talking about two different things. We've batted around whether we should change our own term to accreditation of relief nurseries, but decided to continue it with certification.
Bobby, this is Kelly, and the other issue that this addresses is that relief nurseries are certified outside of the state, as Mary Ellen articulated, and exist outside of state funding because state funding is only a portion of relief nurseries overall, each individual relief nursery's budget. So it isn't certification of the nursery, it's certification for state funding.
Which would allow, I just want to be clear, that allows the, to separate the process. So ORN can certify any program that meets its criteria, but we're discussing eligibility for state funding from the Early Learning Division, and this is certification that allows a program to be eligible to be considered for funding by the Early Learning Division. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't hear the answer to, was.
Yeah, that's what we're communicating.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. On page 4, there are a couple of references to ORN's certification and compliance specialist. We'd like to just delete that and add, ORN. We think it's a little bit too specific. We don't know whether that person's job title will change, and these rules will be in existence for a long time. So if we could just delete that, we'd be very happy. And that's the case with, there's a couple mentions of that in there. So moving on to 414.
I just want to interrupt for 1 second, Mary Ellen, to tell committee members that you're also seeing comments in addition to ORN's, and we want to focus now on what Mary Ellen is telling us, but I want committee members to remember that in our deliberations, these other comments are going to be relevant for our deliberations. So, so hold on to the document, but right now we just want to focus on what Mary Ellen's able to share with us. So I'm sorry for interrupting, Mary Ellen. I should have said that at the beginning.
No, and I'm happy to take questions on those questions, and we took them seriously as we gave our revisions to the committee as well. So moving on to 414-600-0025 certification process. We would suggest that the title should be replication, certification, and recertification to more adequately represent what we're talking about here. So there's the initial replication of a relief nursery, and then there's certification, and then we recertify on a rotating schedule as well, and we think all of that should be covered. So moving on to page 5.
I'm not quite sure that I understand replication. Can you talk more about, I mean, I see how certification and recertification is relevant for the state rules, but I'm not quite sure that I understand replication.
So there's lots of language in here about an entity interested in becoming a relief nursery must submit the following to ORN, and that's our internal process for beginning the road to certification, and that's the process we call replication. So it's the beginning of becoming a new relief nursery, and it can take a couple of years to do all the training and fundraising and everything necessary to become a relief nursery.
Bobby, the adaptation and training in our model, adaptation of the relief nursery model and training in the model.
Hey, Bobby, can staff ask a question, please?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yes, please.
So this is Dave, and I apologize for jumping in here. I just want to sort of understand the language around replication, but I'm trying to figure out how it relates to the also suggestion around certification for state funding, because it seems like if this set of rules is limited to that purpose, I'm not sure, I'm having a harder understanding of why you as ORN would also want to include the replication part in that process. I don't know if that question's making sense.
So David, basically what you're saying is us suggesting, this is Tim, us suggesting adding replication puts more into rules than you think is necessary? Or you're asking the question about that?
I'm trying to figure, because it seems to be extending the part of the process that's not about the certification to receive state funds.
Well, sure. We're happy to take that out. I think you folks.
It was just a question. So, anyways, we can come back to it. But I just wanted to put out that question.
Yes, happy to take it out. It's pretty prescriptive. Okay, do you want to move on to page number 5? Here again, in number 3, we're suggesting that you take out the titles of the certification compliance and compliance specialist and the executive director of ORN, and leave it at, an ORN replication team. It's just a little very specific. And in number 4, we suggest that you add the words, the assessment shall consist of, at a minimum, site visits, et cetera, as well as a review of documents, so that you can see that it's a pretty fulsome process that we go through to do the certification, and the documentation is onerous and lengthy. Moving on to page number 6, appeals of certification decisions. We suggest that it be changed to appeals of certification to receive state funding, and that's reflected in number 1 as well. Certification or recertification for state funding. Any questions before I move on to page 7? So our suggestion on page number 7 is to number 9, add the same language, certification for state funding. And with all these changes, as I say, we're trying to address perceived constitutional problems with the language. So moving on to page 8.
Can we stop here so we're sure everybody in the committee, including me, understands Okay, so this just says that the final decision, I'm not sure what this says. Can you talk some more?
Sure. I mean, this is an appeals process if a relief nursery is not certified. It gives them the right to go through this process and ultimately go up to the state for an adjudication on the question for state funding.
Okay, this may be a really dumb question, but what if, is that the same, are you saying the same thing as if a program was denied, because what certification does is it allows them to be eligible for state funding. So are we talking about the program going through the process to appeal the denial of certification so they're not eligible? Is that what we're talking about?
Right.
So can I jump in? I think the issue that Marianne was bringing up is because state funds are involved, there needs to be some kind of appeal process for entities who wish to be eligible for state funds.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Moving on to page number 8, revocation of certification. We have suggested the language in here. So it's very process oriented too. Those are our suggestions.
And this is Lisa, and I'll just jump in. I just want you all to know that this language will require additional legal review. So you can give us, it would be helpful, Mary Ellen, to help us understand at this point, what, I know that you've touched on them a little bit just in terms of not being in compliance with core services and minimum requirements, but are there other conditions in that might initiate some kind of a revocation of a certification by ORN? What would those conditions be? And then what process might you go through to do that? And that's really what we're trying to get to.
Well, if a nursery is not meeting the core requirements and minimum services, the first thing we would do would be to work with them to bring them up to snuff, right? Because our hope was that everybody could get into compliance. But if after, and we would, we would also, we'd have a business MOU too, so it would be, which kind of has business standards and requirements for operation. If after working with us in conjunction with the ELD, a nursery couldn't come into compliance, we would revoke certification for state funding for the relief nursery. That relief nursery could then appeal to the state, appeal that decision to the committee, and then to the executive committee of ORN. And if they're not satisfied with the outcome of the appeal, they can request a review of the decision by the ELD.
So Lisa, I think maybe this is a question for you. So this is if ORN revokes. This isn't if the ELD decides they're out of compliance with some contract language. This is limited to if ORN revokes their certification?
That's correct. Just to ensure that we have an open process that, again, as David mentioned, because state funds are contingent upon certification. If the relief nursery's certification is revoked, there has to be some way for that relief nursery to seek redress or to at least challenge any action.
Thank you.
To ensure.
Did we adequately answer your questions, David and Lisa?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So still on page, moving on, still on page 8, eligibility for state funds. This is new language that I hadn't seen in number 1, so it's a bit confusing, but it starts, public funds received by relief nursery programs shall be used to improve child safety, reduce foster care placements, and lead to improved healthy child development. While we like that language, that is language that's exactly taken from SB 314, and we would suggest that it's redundant and should not be in that section. So we would suggest that you...
Yeah, Mary Ellen, Lisa, because we are required in sub 5 of section 2 to adopt rules to that degree, I want to be sure that we have this language in our rules so that we comply with the bill.
I mean, that's fine with us. You know, it's language that's already law. I would suggest that it's misplaced in eligibility for state funds. But maybe, Lisa, we can talk about that.
Where would you put it if you had?
Lisa, I have a clarifying question for you with regard to the taking this excerpt as identifying us as eligible for state funds. It's in the Senate bill. It's part of the requirement of a statewide evaluation. So it's in Senate Bill 314. I think it's section. Section 2.
That's reference.
And then 4.
So this is where just the construction of the
those are taken from one section that relates to us participating in an independent statewide evaluation.
Clearly.
Okay. I was just curious as to how
that is true, but that is true, but then there's a later section of the bill around the use of the funds that references that language back. So there's this kind of weird self-referential language within that statute.
Yeah. So you're saying that those were referenced later when the Senate bill talks about use of funds?
Correct, and directs the council to adopt rules to administer 417788, including rules that describe the use of state funds to meet the outcomes that are listed in subsection 3, which are improved child safety, reduced foster care placements, and improved healthy child development. It's strange construction, but that's what we got out of legislative council, and that's how we're interpreting it.
And I think that's also why it's important to have that language written out in rule, because it's confusing if you don't follow the other reference in the bill to that language.
Yeah, we just were curious as to where it came from, but you're right. The construction is, you know, the reference, the later reference to it, it makes sense if it was called out within the use of funds later in the bill.
And I think having this explicitly written out in rule also makes that funny referential construction within the bill clearer.
Any other questions before I move on? I'm still on page 8. The numbering is a little strange though, because we've referenced number 1, but it's actually, we'd like to change what is now number 2 and suggest, or in consultation with the division, shall establish a methodology and formula for the allocation of relief nursery state funds. And then going on to page 9.
I have a question. I'm not, the language we had, I don't know, I can't see here, but the language that we had worked through earlier was that ORN would advise on something. I can't remember the exact language. It was something like ORN would advise. Can you tell me the difference between the language that we had been using about ORN as advising and ORN will, now I've lost the place, so I don't have the exact language. ORN, oh, we just slipped by it. Anyway, can you just talk about the different language you're considering and how you see them as different?
Sorry, which section to which are you referring? Because if you look on page 9, what we had suggested language on for number 2 has been renamed to number 3 on the left-hand side.
Okay, Cass, can you go up just a little bit? I think I can see 4, but I can't see 3. Ah, there we go.
Yeah, so this is Lisa. Let me see if I can help clarify.
Thank you.
So in the version that ORN had been working from, I had added the new one with regard to, as a reaction to Senate Bill 314. So that's relatively new. So yes, I put that at the very beginning. So we renumbered. So the new 2 that reads, the division in consultation with ORN Board of Directors shall establish a methodology and formula for allocation of state funds. What ORN is suggesting is that should now read, ORN in consultation with the division shall establish a methodology and formula for the allocation of relief nursery state funds. Then they go on to suggest that there was a new section, this is new language that they're proposing. ORN will consult and collaborate with the division on state funding requests. So that's new. They're not revising anything, that they're adding this as potentially a proposed new language.
Right, I think it applies more to number 3. So number 3 says, and this is on page 9, applications for state funding must be submitted to the division on forms prescribed by the division. And the final sentence, you know, the appropriate role for the ELD is for us to consult back and forth on the funding request. And then the ELD has the right to make a recommendation to the governor as to whether she should include it in her budget or not. But I think we would take issue with the division shall make final decisions on state funding requests because, as you know, entities all over ask for additional funds beyond what are requested in the governor's budget. So I don't want
I have a clarification. I thought this was an individual program applying to ELD, that their program receives state funding and would have nothing to do with requests to the governor or the legislature for inclusion in budget requests. Can we just have clarification what this section is talking about?
We would like that clarification too, and I think the other thing to throw in there is we're not familiar with applications. That's historically not language that has been used, and we don't know what the forms prescribed by the division are. We don't understand this either.
Okay, I have a question for you, Lisa. Does this have anything to do with the governor or the legislature's budget? Or is this only about applying to ELD for relief nursery funds?
This has absolutely nothing to do with any agency budget request of the governor's office or the legislature. This is solely with regard to funding requests from a relief nursery. This is how that happens. And in answer to Kelly's concerns and questions about applications, applications in this sense, the term applications in this sense is just broad. We have to have some mechanism by which a request for funding comes into this agency, and so applications is used generally.
Okay,
I'm completely confused now. I think
this is a miscommunication, isn't it?
I explained, Mary Ellen and I spoke briefly about this because she has this very same question, and so we talked on the phone, and I explained to Mary Ellen that this absolutely has nothing to do with an agency request budget that's submitted to the governor's office. This is solely about this division's distribution of funds that have been appropriated by the legislature. It's how we are going to distribute those funds. It's not about what we ask for from the legislature or what the governor's office asks for at all.
So another way to put this is we have rulemaking authority over funds that the legislature allocates. So the rulemaking authority begins after the legislature approves a budget, in some sense, is one way to think about it.
So I would suggest that we have a lot of, work to do.
Hey, excuse me, Mary Ellen, the use of the term allocation may be unfortunate. Maybe we're really talking about distribution. I will clarify with the lawyers about that, but it's just we're not talking about legislatively adopted or approved budgets.
Or the process for creating.
Or the process for that.
That's outside of our rulemaking scope.
Yes, clearly.
So I would say that we need a lot of work, now that that's been clarified, that we need to rework this section, because I'm profoundly uncomfortable with how broad this is.
Right, and so just, again, Mary Ellen, this is the process in which the division and the relief nursery enters into the contract process, right? It's just how we cross that threshold into the contracting process. So that's what I mean by application. So, okay.
So I really think that I will put some thought into this, but I'm expressing that I feel very, very, very uncomfortable with the language that is in there right now.
Mary Ellen, is the discomfort because you think it has to do with that the language could be interpreted to be focusing on state budgetary requests, agency budgets, or legislative budgetary activity? Is that the discomfort?
I think that's part of it. I think it gives the state authority to direct funding in a way that perhaps the legislature didn't intend it to be directed.
So that ELD could take a budget line and not spend it as the legislature gave it? Is that the concern?
That's right.
Okay.
Bobby, this is Kelly too, and then another thing is it's not articulated that it's orange in this particular, in number 3, and so one of the concerns that we've mentioned or we've discussed in our previous meetings has been an entity applying for relief nursery funds directly to the ELD.
Okay, I think this is Lisa. I think this is a language problem where the language is written to describe a process that an individual goes through to apply for funding and has nothing to do with the issues that Orrin is concerned about. And so I think that is the issue that I'm hearing. I don't know if I'm hearing accurately that the rule language is written to talk about how ABC program applies for allocated relief nursery funds. and the ORN is concerned about how the legislature and state agencies, the governor, create budgets, and how as the Early Learning Division broadly administers its budgets. It feels like we've got a real miscommunication going on about what this section is saying. Take
that under advisement.
Am I correct?
Yes. So duly noted, and I'll take it under advisement.
Okay. Okay.
Plugging along, we would, on page 9, we would suggest that section 0038, the funding allocation appeal, and on page 10, we just have one little change to include, funding allocation decision. So moving on then to section 0041, coordination with the statewide early learning system. Mainly, we just think some of this is redundant. So we would suggest that you delete B, which is now on page 11, just for redundancy's sake. And then we'd suggest that you revise C because of the section 2, and take out the word focused populations, and then take out the entire section. I'm on page 11 now. That says focused populations, because that's actually called out in SB 314. Again, it seems redundant to be referencing these things so many times.
So you don't have, Mary Ellen, I want to be sure I understand. There's no problem with the concepts embedded in 1 and 2 about the hubs and the focused populations. It's a question of possible redundancy.
Exactly. And I think the term focused populations is, again, it's called out in SB 314, although they don't call it focused populations, and just it's confusing to come up with another term in the middle of the section.
And the other thing, Bobby, this is Kelly. The other issue or concern with this is that it's the focused population of the hub, and it's really, our focused population, relief nursery focused population, should be in relief nursery rule. It's fine to require us to coordinate and collaborate with our hubs, but we still have the primary populations that we serve. So the concern would be that this focused population is someone else's metric in someone else's population and not relief nursery population. So if it's going to have this, it should reflect what is in SB 314.
Okay, I would just say, and if you read the Equity Implementation Committee's feedback, this may be a substantive disagreement, because there's a strong feeling that when the legislature charged the Early Learning Council and Division to integrate services and to move to equity, that that decisions will be shared. So I think this may be an area of substantive disagreement. Okay.
Well, I'd be happy to talk to the equity. I made some inquiries to Lisa yesterday about talking to the Equity Commission, because I think they'd be interested to see SB 314, as well as some things that our evaluator has come up with in our not yet published evaluation. Should we move on?
Yes.
Okay, so my comments are on page 11, but number 4 has been shifted down to page 12. It says Orange shall notify the division of any changes in programming, leadership, budget, or location of any relief nursery. I've just added substantial changes in program, executive director, large budget shifts, or location of any relief nursery, simply because budgets change all the time. And I think what the state is more interested in seeing is large budget shifts, substantial changes in program and things like that. Moving on to minimum requirements on page 12. Our suggestion is that we use the core services and minimum requirements document for minimum requirements and just make sure that that language is exactly the same. And I don't know whether you can just reference it or whether it needs to all be spelled out. But we just want to make sure that it's exactly the same language.
I'm not sure the minimum requirements for a contract with ELD is the same thing as minimum requirements to be certified by ORN. I mean, one of the minimum requirements for ELD is going to be that they be certified by ORN, so all those have to be met. But isn't this about, maybe, Lisa, this is a question for you. Isn't this about minimum requirements to get a contract? In addition to one of the requirements being that you're not even eligible if ORN hasn't certified you, but this is what else in addition?
Well, actually, what I did was I referenced ORN's documents dated April 6, 2017, and it's mostly verbatim. I had to change some language so that it looked like rule language, but it's reflective and mirrors their minimum requirements and core service requirements of this document that I have referenced.
Oh, so is the concern then, Mary Ellen, that she didn't use the most current version?
No, I'm sure she did. It's posted on the web. I just want to make sure that it's all the same.
As part of the reason that we have it here, Bobby, in addition to, having to have something articulated with regard to funding, but it is just it's just so we have transparency for the member of the public, the general public, to understand exactly what the minimum requirements are to become a relief nursery.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
It's our obligation to inform the public.
Okay. Okay. Then I need help, Mary Ellen, on if these are the accurate minimum requirements, then can you help us understand what the issue is?
So I think one of our issues is, are we talking about core services and minimum requirements to contract with the state or certification? And it's just a little confusing.
Well, essentially, I believe that the intent that we came to conclusion on last December was that you wanted us to tie them together. So you wanted us to reflect what are the minimum requirements that are required of every relief nursery and what are the core services that are required of relief nurseries, and you wanted us to tie them together. So that's the intent.
So another way to put that is, since certification by ORN is a requirement in order to receive state funds, these are, therefore, you have to be able to meet these requirements to be eligible for state funds.
And you'd asked us to tie it to the certification process.
Okay. Okay, I'm concerned about time. We've got 2 more things, 2.5 more things on our agenda. So,
Okay.
Mary Ellen, do you think you've been able to tell us about this issue, what you wanted?
Yeah, I think so. There are a couple other places that.
Great, keep going.
Page 14, I think it just speaks for itself. We call it the therapeutic early childhood program, not the classroom, because it's larger than just the classroom. So that's in a couple of places.
Okay.
On page 15, number 6, home visiting must be offered in all relief nursery program components. That's not the case, so that should be out.
I think I need we haven't seen it yet. So
yeah,
I'm not sure that I get that I understand the issue yet. What page 15?
We're getting there. We're getting right there. It's sub 6 right there.
The issue is that home visiting must be offered in all relief nursery program components. Home visiting is required in our core program components. That's the state funding funds, but the relief nurseries have multiple other services that they provide, and not all of them necessarily would have home visiting. So it's just it's not a huge thing, but it's just something that it should say home visiting must be offered in all core relief nursery program components.
So is the issue whether home visiting is a core service or an optional? Is that the issue?
No, the issue is that it's not in all relief nursery programs. It's in our core programs. We don't have to spend, time is of the essence. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this right now.
Okay.
Okay.
So the last thing is page 17, number 3, information may be shared among division hubs and relief nurseries. We would just change that to anonymous aggregated data may be shared among division hubs and relief nurseries. Just to make it real clear that we're not sharing private
people's names. Yeah. Great.
That's it.
Oh, thank you so much. This was really helpful. Before we move on, though, I want to be sure that committee members who could now have an opportunity to ask Mary Ellen questions.
This is Christy Cox. There we go. This is Christy Cox. I don't have specific questions for Mary Ellen, but thank you for doing that specific walkthrough. I guess I have more questions probably for you, Bobby, to help us understand the next steps for this process.
Well, I'll start, but I'm gonna rely on Lisa for accuracy. We are, the staff is gonna continue to work on language to be sure we're in compliance and that we incorporate the changes that can be made, and that at our November meeting, the committee is going to go through a 5x5 process. And at the end of the November meeting, we will be sending forward whatever recommendations we create to the Early Learning Council for them to act upon. But Lisa, feel very comfortable correcting me.
No, I think you've characterized it accurately, Bobby. We just need some more staff work on language to address some other areas and we'll be bringing that back to the committee.
Okay. Christy, does that answer it? Your question?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. Any other committee members have questions? And I think that's good that Christy broadened it to, about what's next, or as well as questions for Mary Ellen.
Bobby, this is Abby. I have a quick question. With the expansion of relief nurseries to include satellite locations, does there need to be any distinction, delineation within the rules for I'm not sure what you call it, a central relief nursery versus a satellite location?
It's a great question. I'm going to send it to staff. And Mary Ellen, did you want to weigh in before, also?
I mean, that is a great question. Just for the purposes of everybody else, we went to a satellite model, 5-6 years ago, on the theory that if you have one central location, you can, use the administration of that location and then have a smaller administrative footprint at so-called satellite locations. Perhaps that should be in rule. We would be open to it.
Well, and part of the definition of the satellite, it's just building on what Mary Ellen said, that's the reason within the current funding formula that the satellite locations, the satellite locations received less funding because it cost them less because they didn't have the same administration. It was just an extension of the one entity. And then, of course, we're realizing that some of the satellite locations are quite large and they're fully functioning relief nurseries and have the same cost requirements essentially as other nurseries. So it's an interesting question, and I think it's something that we should give us time to explore how that might, what recommendation we might be able to make to the committee on inclusion in the rule.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee or comments?
Bobby?
Yes.
While you're giving them some time to think about it, it would also be beneficial for staff to know if there are particular areas that have been brought up today that are, policy type level questions that committee would like further information or analysis from staff. We can, if they can let us know what that might be, we can work on that in the interim and have something prepared.
Or may also help us there think about how to make sure that key questions the committee has, there's enough time to fully deliberate next time we meet.
Right. Yeah, that's as important, if not more important. Make sure we have plenty of time on the agenda to address those issues.
So I would ask, would committee members, is there anything you would like more elaboration on, or any things that are policy questions that are that you would like to be sure we address adequately, fully?
So, Bobby, I think that takes care of the relief nursery piece for today. There's just more to come and more work to be done.
Okay, I'd like to take public comment if there's any on the relief nursery discussion. So the same thing we just asked committee members. If there's anybody in the public who would like to share their thoughts now, it would be great to hear from you. Okay, I would like to say to committee members, well, to the public also, if you walk away and thoughts go through your mind and you think, this is really a policy issue that I am unclear about, if you would send an email to Cass, that would be extremely helpful. She's the one who, we all have her email address because she sends out the information. So I think she would be a great person to direct it to, and she'll send it to the right place. So thank you. Okay, the next thing, we're gonna wind back to CBR rules for just a minute because Rick remembered something important for us to be thinking about that that was missed in the first, and so I'm turning it over to him now.
Thank you, Bobby. And this will just take 1 minute. I'm going to send a quick message to everybody.
Okay. So go to your chat box.
And for those of you who might not be on chat, I can read that for you. This is OAR 414-060-0030 sub 1I. An employee, contractor, or provider of child care services under any memorandum of understanding or similar arrangement with one of the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon or administrators of the Tribal Child Care and Development Fund.
And Rich, can you just help us? That's just something that is going to be in the CBR, and you wanted to be sure we knew it.
Rich, you want me to go ahead and take it? This is Kelly.
Fine. Well,
under the Child Care and Development Fund new rules for background checks, we are required to do FBI fingerprint checks along with a lot of other checks. And some of the tribal governments are not in a position to do those. And so this is just to allow us to accept them as subject individuals so that we may do the check on their behalf. So that's all it is. It just allows them to use our central background registry.
Thank you. Okay. Then I think we're going to move on. The CCEC asked staff to come back to us with more on staff qualifications and staff training. And so Kelly and Peter, I don't know how you're sharing this, but I'd like to turn the meeting over to you for the update.
Hi, Bobby. This is Peter Bloom. And in response to the request from the committee and as part of our engagement plan, we sent out surveys to center staff, CF providers, and to registered family, and asked them to look at the proposed rules we had for qualifications and the increased training hours. And we did get back a lot of results and comments, but to really do the survey results justice, it's going to take a bit more than just a couple of minutes to go through it. So I don't know if we want to table that for next meeting.
Given that we only have 5 minutes, maybe that would be a good idea, Peter. Is there anything in writing that would be helpful to share with us before we have the conversation?
Well, I do have some summary notes of the surveys. I can put them in a format that I could send out to the committee.
That would be really helpful. And then committee members, then when it comes up on our agenda, we'll be better able to interpret and to analyze what staff learned. So that would be, thank you, Peter. That would be great.
I'll work on that and try and get that out to Cassandra here within a week.
Thank you very much. Okay. So now we are to the point of the agenda for looking at next steps. We've kind of been doing that as we went along, but Lisa, will you sum it up and just tell us what to expect in November? And we have an issue in November in that our date conflicts with Best Beginning, and both Christy and Donalda are members of Best Beginning. So one of the things we're playing with is whether or not we could move our November meeting to make it possible for our ad hoc, because the primary activity is going to be relief nurseries. So I don't know. I mean, the thing we've talked about is a possibility of going a week early to November 2nd. We can't go a week late because it's an early learning council meeting. The other thought that came to my mind was moving to another day of the week. I don't think it's possible to do make a decision on that like this in a big group. But I would like to hear any thoughts people had, and then we'll be working with you through CAS to see if we can find a date other than November 9th for our November meeting. But are there any thoughts that people have that they would like to share now before CAS starts working with us to find another date? Okay, so Lisa, can you sum up everything that we did today and give us a review of what we're going to be doing in November?
Okay, so you did, you saw for the first time the proposed language on the central background registry, and just a few moments ago, we wanted to clarify that there was some additional language that we would be proposing, and that is to allow as an option the division to run background checks and enroll certain individuals in the central background registry. So that was a last minute, not last minute for staff, but kind of an add-on for you all at the end, and we apologize for that. Then we also, you know that you'll be seeing the beginning of rulemaking promulgation for the Child Care Contribution Tax Credit Program. We'll be having rule language for you in November. It's also very likely that Spark rule development, you will be starting to see Spark rule language also in November. I will be sure for my colleagues here who are looking at me unfavorably that they will have time first thing on the agenda to get your feedback on staff qualifications and staff training. It's imperative that they get that from you all, so that will be first on our agenda. And we'll be continuing to work on the relief nursery rules, some back and forth, but we'll get you another draft of rule language for November. And Kathy,
not only do we have a problem with the date, we have a problem with the length of the agenda, don't we?
Yes, quite possible, as I ran through all of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that, you know, I think the contribution tax credit program is not terribly pressing. It'd be nice to have it done, and the Spark rule development, that might also, we might be able to delay that till December. So we'll, you know, we'll revisit this as we kind of progress.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, my reaction when you were summarized was that sounded like more content than we could handle in one meeting. So, okay, we'll work on that, and we're also going to work on the date, and so we'll be in communication with everybody. Are there any closing comments anybody would like to make? I'd like to thank Mary Ellen and Tim and Kelly for walking us through their comments and helping us understand. So, and to everybody for your attention and to everything that we are dealing with. So with that, I think we'll close, and we'll be communicating with you via email in between. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for service.
Thank you.